Hello, future teachers. Welcome back to the Tower Languages TKT Academy. I'm glad you're here and ready to continue improving your teaching skills. In today's lesson, we're going to explore one of the key topics from Cambridge TKT Module 1, Units 1 Lexis. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand the essential concepts, see practical classroom examples, become a more confident English teacher, and be better prepared for the TKT exam. So, let's get started.
Before we jump in, remember that today's topic really is one of the absolute foundations of effective lesson planning. Understanding Lexis helps you clarify language structure so your students can communicate much more clearly, which ultimately makes you a more effective and confident teacher.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with an introduction to Lexis, move on to meaning and word forms, and then explore word relationships and registers. After that, we'll dive into some classroom teaching strategies, wrap up with a quick review and reflection, and finish with our conclusion and next steps. All right, Section 1, Introduction to Lexis, Understanding the Building Blocks of Language. So Lexis isn't just single, isolated words. Take the concept of time, for instance. Yes, time is a word, but Lexis expands into much larger building blocks, like full phrases and expressions. Think of things like beat the clock, on time, or time flies when you're having fun. Grasping this broader definition is really the key to clear communication and appreciating just how rich the English language actually is. Moving right along to Section 2, Meaning and Word Forms, the Architecture of Vocabulary. You know, every single word you teach can have up to 4 distinct layers of meaning. It's kind of like an onion. We start right at the center with the denotative meaning, which is just your straightforward literal dictionary definition. Then we zoom out to the connotative layer, which adds all that emotional or cultural weight. Beyond that is the figurative meaning, where we get into the imaginative or metaphorical uses of the language. And finally, the contextual meaning, which is entirely shaped by the specific situation the word is actually used in. Let's put this into a practical classroom context using the word December. Your students might easily learn the denotative meaning, right? The 12th month of the year. Easy. But to truly master the Lexis, they have to grasp its connotative weight. In many English-speaking cultures, December brings up feelings of coldness, maybe some nostalgia, winter breaks, and endings. Highlighting these emotional layers really helps your students pick up on the true tone of native speakers. Now, a crucial takeaway here is that you can rapidly expand a student's vocabulary just by showing them how to build upon base words. Think about the architecture of it all. We've got affixation, where adding a prefix like un to happy makes unhappy, or attaching a suffix like to teach gives us teacher. Then we have compounds, where we combine 2 complete words together to create a brand new one. For example, combining note and book creates the compound noun notebook, or mixing cold and hearted gives us the compound adjective cold-hearted. Building on that idea, instead of teaching words completely in isolation, we really must teach language in locked chunks. You have to explicitly point out collocations to your students so they know, for instance, to say make a decision instead of do a decision. This also includes fixed expressions, which are phrases that basically can't be changed, like a piece of cake. And of course, idioms, where the meaning of the phrase is totally different from the individual words themselves, like having to bite the bullet when enduring a painful situation. All right, on to Section 3, Word Relationships and Registers, Navigating Tricky Terrain. As teachers, it's our job to help learners navigate some notoriously tricky linguistic terrain. First off, you gotta watch out for false friends. These are words that look incredibly similar across languages but mean totally different things. Like actual in Spanish means current, but in English, it means real. We also need to keep an ear out for homophones. Those are words that sound the exact same but have different meanings and spellings, like to and two. And finally, homonyms, which have the same spelling or pronunciation but totally different meanings, like a riverbank versus a financial bank. Beyond those tricky words, actively mapping out standard word relationships is a fantastic strategy to help with student memorization. We have synonyms, which share similar meanings, and antonyms, which are opposites. But what's highly effective in the classroom is using lexical sets. This is where you group words by a common theme, like organizing a shirt, pants, and jacket into a clothes set. And of course, word families, which share the exact same root or base word, like act, action, and active. You also definitely need to prepare your students for the reality that vocabulary changes across different varieties of English. Take the transatlantic divide, for example. A British lorry is an American truck. A British flat is an American apartment.
Knowing these really common variations prevents a whole lot of frustration, especially when your students are consuming international media or traveling abroad.
To wrap up this section, students must learn that language constantly shifts based on context, audience, and purpose. We call this spectrum word registers. You move from formal, professional words like assessed down to neutral, everyday words like help, all the way over to informal or colloquial slang like lend a hand. Teaching these registers ensures your students aren't just grammatically correct, but also socially appropriate for whatever situation they find themselves in.
Section 4. Classroom Teaching Strategies, from Theory to Practice.
Here's a golden rule. Learners will always recognize words. That's their receptive vocabulary, long before they can actively use them, which is their productive vocabulary. As a teacher, you basically have to guide them across this bridge. You introduce keywords, sure, but full understanding of the forms, the pronunciation, and the spelling takes time. You really have to allow for this time and provide repeated exposure before expecting your students to actively produce those words in their own speech and writing. So, to actually help them cross that bridge, you should employ 3 core strategies. First, repeat to remember. Learners just have to encounter the same words multiple times, whether that's through categorization or brainstorming activities. Second, learn in context. Seriously, never teach vocabulary in isolation. Embed it within engaging text or real-life situations to clarify the true meaning. And third, discover connections. Help your students expand their vocabulary by exploring those word relationships we talked about earlier, like antonyms, lexical sets, and word families. A highly practical tool you can implement right away is having your students maintain a dedicated word diary. Encourage them to record not just the meaning, but the part of speech, the pronunciation, collocations, and a few real-world usage examples. Alongside this, as the teacher, you should be explicitly highlighting complete language chunks in texts, because that's exactly how children learn their first language. When phrases like a cup of coffee or at the moment are treated as full chunks, learners start to memorize them as single, complete units. Okay, Section 5, Review and Reflection Key Takeaways. Let's consolidate what we've learned. Here are your key takeaways from today's lesson. First, Lexis expands beyond single words to include phrases and locked expressions. Second, words possess multiple layers of meaning and complex relationships. And finally, transitioning learners from receptive to productive vocabulary requires repetition and context. Please keep these 3 crucial takeaways in mind, as they will absolutely guide your future lesson planning. Now, I want you to take a moment and just reflect on your own classroom experience. Think about the last lesson you taught. How could teaching language in chunks, rather than isolated words, improve your students' fluency? Section 6, Conclusion and Next Steps, Continuing Your Journey. Congratulations! You have just completed another important TKT lesson. Remember that passing the TKT exam is not about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding how teaching works in real classrooms and becoming a better English teacher. Now it's time to put today's lesson into practice. Visit cursos.tower.languages and continue your learning with resources designed especially for English teachers. There you'll find lesson summaries, downloadable teaching resources, exam-style practice, and more. The link is in the description below. In the next lesson, we will take a close look at phonology. Remember, great teachers are made one lesson at a time. See you in the next lesson.